Hello everyone. In this video I'm going to quickly demonstrate how to install VMware ESXi bare metal hypervisor on your Raspberry Pi 4. To give you a brief overview, ESXi is a type 1 hypervisor, as you can see here. So the advantage of type 1 over type 2, which is traditionally used where you'd have your hardware Intel, AMD, any ARM based processor, and you'll have the host operating system like Windows, Linux, Mac, Solaris running on top of it, which would host again your VMware, and then VMware would host your guest operating system. So the disadvantage here is that the host operating system would consume unnecessary resources like RAM and your hardware space, which would have been directly dedicated to the hypervisor. But with the ESXi, the host OS is eliminated and the hypervisor directly runs on top of the hardware, thereby saving a lot of resources. So with that cleared out, there are a lot of applications of running ESXi on your Raspberry Pi. You can use your Raspberry Pi for hosting Windows or Linux cloud, or even other applications where you want to quickly deploy your applications on your Raspberry Pi before deploying it in the cloud. So with all those things cleared out, let's get started. Let me first go ahead and install a 64-bit Raspberry Pi OS, since the ESXi I'm using is also 64-bit, and I'm going to load the full OS here. Go ahead and install it on my 64 GB SD card. Let me install set username. So it's version and password, and that should do it. I'm going to go ahead and use the LAN, so I don't need the Wi-Fi. So we'll resume back once the write is completed. So it's done writing to the SD card. Now let me go ahead and boot up the Raspberry Pi. I have powered on the Raspberry Pi. It should start up anytime now. Okay, it's booting. We'll wait for the initial boot up and configuration sequence to complete. We'll resume back once it's done. So the initial configuration is completed. So let me do one small update, which is necessary for loading the ESXi, the hypervisor. So that's RPI. Let me just check if I can increase the font size. Yeah, so RPI EEPROM update. So this is needed to ensure that you have the latest BIOS. So in my case, I already had done this, but you might need in your case if you have the old BIOS. So after this is done, you can go ahead and reboot, and just to check if it boots up properly. And once that's done, you can power off your Raspberry Pi and go with the next sequence. My Raspberry Pi booted up successfully, so I'm going to go ahead and safely shut it down and proceed with the next set of tweaks. We'll resume back later. So now you can power off your Raspberry Pi, remove the SD card and insert out your PC, and you should see a boot folder. You can just, don't worry about it, go ahead and format this, and when you name it, just name it to UEFI FAD, and go ahead and format it. So just show, this is specifically done because now you're going to load here with the latest firmware. So there are two websites where you need to visit to download the repositories. One is the Raspberry Pi repository, and another is for the UEFI BIOS. So I have downloaded both of them. I'm going to paste the link in the description where you can download it. So I've downloaded and extracted. First, go to the firmware master and look for boot, and here you have to copy this entire thing onto your UEFI folder or the boot folder. Once it's copied, you need to get rid of the kernel, because we are going to use the kernel from the the UEFI patched firmware. So let the copy complete. At the same time, I'm going to parallelly go here, and this is what you have to copy now. So before that, look out for kernel, and you need to get rid of all of them. Okay. Once that's done, go ahead and copy to here, and it's going to ask to replace everything. Once you're done with that, more small tweak you may have to do. Let's go to config and just type GPU underscore and and save it. Now you can insert this back to your SD card back to your Raspberry Pi and get booted up. We'll resume back once the Raspberry boots up. So I have powered on the Raspberry Pi. Before you could jump in to the main OS, we need to just stop the boot. So I just tap on the escape. Now go to the device manager, Raspberry Pi configuration, advanced configuration, and you can see here it's limiting the RAM to just 3 GB. If you have like 4 GB or 8 GB Raspberry Pi, you have to go ahead and disable this, and I would recommend you use a Raspberry Pi with up to 8 GB if you are planning to host Windows and Linux parallelly. So with that configuration done, I'm going to go ahead and tap escape and then S, and this is going to save the settings. So next is that I'm going to go ahead and flash the VMware ESXi installer onto my SD card. So I'm going to exit. I'm going to go ahead and reset, but I'm going to power it off now. So what I'm going to do is that I already have a SD card with the ESXi installed, and I'm using RuFS, but just to show you the process, I'm going to go ahead and select the ESXi installer. So that will be here. I'm going to paste the link in the description where you can download this. Ensure this is BIOS or UEFI, and in my case I have a 4 gig flash drive, so I'm going to go ahead and flash. So this is going to do a destructive flash, so ensure that you have all the data in that flash drive backed up. This should take a couple of minutes, and you should have a bootable ESXi installer on your flash drive. So we'll resume back once the flashing is completed. Okay, so it has successfully flashed. Now I'm going to go ahead and mount this SD card onto the flash drive onto my Raspberry Pi. I'm going to go ahead and boot up my Raspberry Pi. So there's one small settings I may have to do. So I'm going to manually go ahead and select the bootable media by tapping on the escape key in the boot manager. So I know this is where JetFlash, this is where my ESXi installer is, but you can see there's a USB storage. This is where I'm going to finally install the ESXi you can say like hypervisor. But for the final demonstration, I'm going to use an external hard drive of 1 terabyte. This is because now when you're hosting multiple operating systems, you need a good amount of storage. So right now, for the demonstration purpose, I'm going to use a 64 GB external flash, but then I'm going to plug in my 1 terabyte hard drive where I have the ESXi already configured with multiple operating systems. So let me go ahead and boot up my external flash. So it's starting up. Let me go ahead. This is going to take a while. The initial boot up of ESXi is a little slower. It's not just the installer, but the actual, you can say the hypervisor takes up a little bit of time to load up. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead with the installation F11. So it's going to scan for all the mounted drives. So if by any chance, if for example it's showing up 64 GB for me, if you have an external hard drive connected and it does not show up, keep tapping the F5, because I have seen at times it takes like 5 to 10 seconds for external hard drives to get populated here. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and select my 64 GB storage. Again, keep in mind, I'm doing this only for demonstration purpose. Finally, I'm going to go ahead and use my external hard drive. So I'm going to set my root password. Keep in mind the default username is root. Okay. Okay, yeah, I totally forgot that it emphasizes on strong password, so let me go ahead and use a little strong password. So this should do it. Yeah, so let me go ahead and install. So installation should take a while. I'll resume back once the installation is completed. So we are done with the installation. I'm going to go ahead and tap enter to reboot, but instead of using the installation medium which I use now, the external drive I use now, I'm going to go ahead and mount my hard drive, a 1 TB hard drive, and show you the rest of the process. So I'm booting up the Raspberry Pi with my external hard drive, but before it boots up, let me do the same selection. That's a small tweak we may have to do if in case of an external hard drive. I have seen this happen for me, but again, this did not show up when I used a 64 GB flash drive. So if you go to the boot device manager and for example boot options, here change boot order, so you can see that my hard drive is showing up, but I have seen that at times yes, so you can see UEFI JMicro external disk, so it does show up, but even if I do this and reboot, it does not boot yet. So what I have to do is I'm going to go ahead and delete boot options and delete all the unnecessary things like this, and just retain the the JMicro my external hard drive. Commit changes and exit. So now if you check for, there's only the external hard drive and the internal SD card. So I'm going to go ahead and go ahead and reboot. That's it. So I give like reset, and now it should by default go ahead and boot the hard drive, boot from the hard drive where the VMware ESXi is installed. So let's see. And I don't know if this is bug specific to me. If I try to hit enter here, at times it not boot. So let's see. And yep, that's it. It's booting up the ESXi Hypervisor from my external 1 TB hard drive. Like I mentioned before, the whole boot up of this hypervisor is slow. So initial, it does take time to boot and load up the entire hypervisor. So once the OS, or you can say hypervisor, is fully booted, you should see an IP address printed on the screen. So you are going to use that the IP address and go to your host machine and type that in the browser. Also ensure that your Raspberry Pi and your machine, that's a laptop desktop, should be on the same network. So we'll wait for it to completely boot, and once the boot is completed, we're going to switch to our desktop. Okay, so the OS has booted up. Now we're going to switch to our desktop and type in this IP address, and it should load the Hypervisor login page. Okay, you might be getting this because the time might not be in sync. So let me go. As mentioned earlier, the username is root. So this is the password which I had set earlier. Hope it's correct. Okay, yeah. So this is how the whole interface looks like. So this gives the information about the Raspberry Pi, which I have here. It's a quad core with 4 gigs of RAM, and I don't have any external RAM interface. Also, there's a network interface here which is assigned the IP, which that's how I have logged in. At the same time, it's creating internal DNS server, which is again goes to the default gateway IP. And this is where our our data store is nothing but your hard drive, where the VMs will be stored. Keep in mind this time is out of sync. So one thing I would recommend is go to manage system, and in date and time adjust your date and time to the current date and time. That's in my case is 30th April, and save it. This is going to prevent that the boot up when you log in, you'll get an error. So that would be avoided here. So with that cleared out, that's one more thing I would like to give as a hint or a tip, you can say, is that go to services and you can search TSM SSH. So you can go ahead and start it. So advantage is that you can do a secure shell login to the Raspberry Pi and then run the necessary operations. It could be even as simple as sending a power off command, power off the Raspberry Pi. Yeah. So with that cleared out, so in my case I have already a operating system, but again let me show you how to create an operating system, load a virtual machine. So create register virtual machine. We are going to go with those options. This is in case if you have already a VMDK file, or if there is already a VM on this hard drive. So let me go ahead and create a new VM. The Win 10. I have already downloaded Windows 10 on my host machine, and as well as I loaded it onto the this hard drive. As you can see right now, at this time of recording the video, it only supports Windows 10, but I haven't tried loading Windows 11 yet, but I think they're compatible and it should work. So this is your hard drive. So there is still 669 GB free. Next is the customization of the virtual machine hard drive. In my case, I'm going to dedicate like the complete 4 cores, and this should be enough with 4 gigs for your GB. And in case I don't have a CD-ROM attached to the Raspberry Pi, so I'm going to go ahead and data store ISO file. As you can see, I have created an ISO folder and already loaded the ISO onto the hard drive. So in our case, this should be the one, and select next and finish. So once done, it should refresh here and you're seeing the virtual machine load up. I'm going to select that. Everything looks okay. I'm going to now click on start. Fail. Okay, I think I have assigned too much of RAM. So let me just make this 3 gigs. It is more than what the Raspberry Pi has right now, since the hypervisor takes up a small amount of RAM. So let me now go ahead and power it on. Okay, so it's booting. I'm just going to tap here to load full screen. Oh man, I did not end up tapping the any key in time, so let me do that now. Okay, yeah, so it's booting up Windows virtually on your Raspberry Pi. While that happens, what I can do is that I can go ahead and let me just shrink this. It's going to keep running in the background there, and let me register one more virtual machine, but this one, let me try to load a small OS. Okay, Raspberry Pi. Okay, 1 core, 1 GB RAM. Okay, and data store, ISO. So just to give you a intro on how exactly did I copy it here, you just have to click on upload, and wherever you have your ISOs downloaded, you can tap on it and it's going to go ahead and upload to your Raspberry Pi, or you can see the hard drive which you have connected to your Raspberry Pi. It's as simple as that. When you do that, in my case I should already have that, but let me just show you. Let's check if I have something smaller. Yeah, I have a Debian here with just 300 MB. When you tap on this, you should see the progress here. This is nothing but it's uploading from your computer, your desktop, onto your Raspberry Pi hard drive. So it's going to take a while. While that happens, this again, there are a couple of factors which determine this speed. One is your hard drive. I'm using a USB hard drive 3.0, but still there is a lot of factors that impact this. Thing is that you might be using the 3.0 interface on your Raspberry Pi, but your hard drive might not be 3.0. So I would recommend, if you have the PCI Express M.2 based hat for your Raspberry Pi, use that. Or if it's a compute module, try to use the M.2 SSD on your Raspberry Pi and load in that. That would give you a better performance with your virtual machine. Okay, the loading is almost complete. There's one more thing which you might have observed, that's all the ISOs which are downloaded are of ARC64 or ARM64. This is because as of the time of recording this video, ESXi does not support loading x86 or x64 OS on the Raspberry Pi, but it might change in the future. So now that I have loaded, let me select and next and finish. Here you can see in the background Windows, it's prompting me for the installation, but let me load this as well. Okay, so let me parallelly zoom this and install, and I'm going to switch to that. As you can see, this is happening. It would be surprising, but this is happening on your Raspberry Pi. I'm loading 2 operating systems parallelly. And that too, it's running Windows on one end and Linux on the other, and both of them running parallel. This is the beauty of ESXi. If you were to do this through a VMware, what you have to do is you have to load the Raspberry Pi OS, and then you would install VMware, and then you would have installed Windows or Linux on it. And you'll see that there's even though I have just a 4 GB Raspberry Pi, it still works like charm. And you can see it's almost done and it's installing. So that's pretty much it, what I wanted to show in this video. Please do like, share and subscribe for more videos like this, and if you have any comment, please drop it in the comment section and I will try my best to answer all your queries. Thank you for watching.